In 1856, photographer George Fardon created a stunning album of San Francisco, a city brimming with ambition. He captured a metropolis of grand buildings and a harbor teeming with ships, a portrait of progress and civilization. He wanted to show the world a beautiful, investable city, but the city he photographed was a lie.
Because while Fardon was framing these pristine streetscapes, a secret army was taking over. Banners like this one appeared overnight. Justice wasn't found in courtrooms. It was decided by thousands of armed citizens who had declared war on the city itself. Welcome back to Old West Unseen. Today, we uncover the violent truth hidden behind the first great photo album of America's wildest city.
This was the face of official San Francisco, a grand city hall, projecting an image of stability and lawful governance. Next to it, the El Dorado, a famous gambling hall. Even here, the line between law and lawlessness was visibly thin. The new Custom House stood as a powerful symbol of federal presence. Through these doors passed the paperwork for millions in gold dust and goods, the lifeblood of the city. It was built to last, a statement of permanence in a city that often felt temporary.
The Merchants' Exchange projected wealth and sophistication. Here, fortunes were made and lost. But look at the street itself, unpaved, littered with debris. The veneer of civilization was thin, and the mud of the frontier was never far away.
The Montgomery Block was considered the city's first fireproof building, a fortress of commerce and culture. It housed lawyers, financiers, and even future literary giants like Mark Twain, all trying to build a respectable society.
That respectable society was a mask for deep-seated fear. With a corrupt police force and rampant crime, every banker with an ornate vault knew his fortune was only as safe as the lock on his door and the gun by his bed.
Old St. Mary's Cathedral was built from brick brought around Cape Horn. On its tower was a stern warning, aimed at the men heading to the brothels of the nearby Barbary Coast. Son, observe the time and fly from evil. San Francisco had already suffered 6 devastating fires between 1849 and 1851. Ornate firehouses like the monumental Engine House were more than just practical. They were symbols of defiance against the city's most relentless enemy.
But beyond the threat of fire was the simple, grinding reality of 19th century life. This death register from the following year tells a quiet, grim story. Notice the birthplaces: England, Italy, China, Ireland. A global population drawn by hope, often meeting an early end.
The city's central square, Portsmouth Plaza, was the epicenter of this volatile mix. On one side stood symbols of order. On the other, the infamous Bella Union, one of the most notorious gambling halls and saloons in the West. Kearny Street was a river of commerce. The density of signs tells the story. Hardware, books, paint, and daguerre galleries. The new technology of photography that promised to capture this fleeting reality. Everyone was here to make a living, or a fortune.
And here is the boomtown reality in plain sight. Imposing brick buildings rise directly from a street of dirt and mud. The air would have been thick with the sound of hammers and saws, the smell of sawdust and horse manure. the raw, chaotic energy of a city being born.
From atop Telegraph Hill, the scale of the explosion becomes clear. In less than a decade, a sleepy village had become a metropolis of wood. Each roof represents a dream, a risk, a life, and each one is a potential spark in a citywide inferno. From another angle, looking out from Russian Hill, the story is the same. Relentless, seemingly unplanned growth. The city was a living organism, consuming the hillsides, sprawling in every direction, as thousands more arrived each month, and they all came by sea. The harbor was a forest of masts, a testament to the global fever of the gold rush. Many of these ships would never leave, abandoned by their crews who rushed inland, their rotting hulls eventually buried to create more land. This area was ironically named Happy Valley, but even here, industry was taking root. The large mechanics building shows that the city wasn't just about gold. It was about the foundries, workshops, and factories needed to support the boom. This simmering tension was nothing new. This is a membership certificate for the first Committee of Vigilance from 1851. Its motto was Fiat Justitia Ruet Caelum, let justice be done, though the heavens fall. They had seized control of the city once before.
And they had formed in opposition to the city's political machine, the so-called Law and Order Party, seen by many as protecting criminals. While they held official power, they were losing the people. And the quiet street in this photo speaks volumes.
Into this fray stepped James King of William, a failed banker who found a new calling as a crusading newspaper editor. His paper, the Daily Evening Bulletin, became the city's conscience, relentlessly exposing graft and naming corrupt officials.
One of King's targets was this man, James P. Casey, a city supervisor with a fiery temper and a well-hidden secret, a criminal past, including time served in New York's infamous Sing Sing prison. When King published this truth, Casey was enraged.
On May 14, 1856, Casey confronted King on the street and shot him. This was the spark. Within days, the Second Committee of Vigilance was born. They took over this building, fortified it with sandbags, and grimly renamed it Fort Vigilance. This was not a disorganized mob. The committee was a disciplined force of nearly 8,000 merchants, sea captains, and workers. They paraded through the streets in massive reviews like this one, clear and silent threat to the city's official government.
When James King of William died from his wound, the city held its breath. The committee acted. They surrounded the jail with their militia, seized Casey and another notorious murderer named Charles Cora, and brought them back to Fort Vigilance for a swift trial.
On May 22nd, during James King's funeral procession, the committee carried out its sentence. Planks were extended from the second-story windows of Fort Vigilance. Before a crowd of thousands, Casey and Cora were hanged, cementing the committee's absolute control over San Francisco.
But history is rarely simple. In the city's cemetery, a monument was raised, not for the martyr, James King, but for his killer, James Casey. It is ornate, expensive, and it suggests that even a man executed by a popular rebellion had powerful friends. The inscription is a final, defiant cry. It asks that God may forgive his persecutors. It tells a completely different story. Not of a criminal meeting his end, but of a man who believed himself a victim. A haunting reminder that there are always two sides to a rope.
And so, life in San Francisco went on. California streets still bustled with commerce, but the city was now ruled by a shadow government, one that had proven it was willing to kill to enforce its will. The view down Stockton Street is of the same city, but it is not the same. The balance of power had shifted from the corrupt politicians to the powerful merchants of the Vigilance Committee. Down Sacramento Street, business continued as usual. The committee deported dozens of criminals and political opponents, and for a time, crime rates did fall. To many, their violent methods were justified by the results. The substantial buildings of Montgomery Street were home to the very men who led the committee. These were not poor revolutionaries. They were the city's wealthy elite, seizing power to protect their own interests. Across the street, the story was the same. The Vigilance Committee ruled for 3 months before voluntarily disbanding, but their influence shaped the city's politics for decades to come. Amidst the political turmoil, daily life had to continue. Institutions like the Orphans' Asylum carried on their work, a quiet testament to the resilience of a city living through extraordinary times. Developments like South Park, a planned community for the wealthy, show the constant desire to impose a more refined Eastern-style order on the city. But 1856 proved that beneath the surface, San Francisco's heart was still wild. The view over North Beach shows a city still growing, its future now irrevocably altered by the actions of the committee. It was a stark lesson in how, on the frontier, power could come not from a ballot box, but from a rope. So we look at these panoramic views again, and we no longer see just buildings. We see a stage for a grand and violent drama, a battle for the soul of a city. The city that sprawls from Harrison Street was built on gold, yes, but its civic foundations, for good or ill, were cemented with the steel and rope of the 1856 Committee of Vigilance. George Farden's album shows a city of ambition, but the true story of 1856 reveals that the Old West wasn't just dusty trails. It was born in the brutal streets of its first great city. In the Bay, a fortress was rising on Alcatraz, a future symbol of the very federal justice the Vigilantes rejected. And so this story finds its place. Thank you for spending your time with us. The past is vast. If there's a story you want us to explore, tell us in the comments. If you found value, we'd be obliged if you'd like this video and subscribe. Until next time, may your trails be clear.